What we need to look at with the OCD journey is we need to think, right, you're not going to get recovered one day like that, bang. That doesn't happen, right? Anyone that oversimplifies it with just the thoughts are thoughts, leave thoughts there, they usually don't understand it. Not even usually, they tend to not really ever understand it, okay? That is a key principle of the recovery journey. You're not taking every thought, disputing the irrational beliefs compulsively to eradicate it. Disputing irrational beliefs is done as a gradual process. It's done bit by bit to help change your philosophies and make yourself more rational and generally calmer. When you have a thought, you're leaving all thoughts there. Humans don't walk down the street and think, oh, I've got to think this, I've got to do that, I've got to think that, I've got to think this. So that doesn't happen, okay? So I have to make those points quite clear because otherwise those can easily get misinterpreted. So we are learning, a key part of the journey is learning to leave thoughts there. Learning not to engage in thoughts. Learning to have any thought, any feeling, any emotion, anything at any point of time in any experience wherever. That is key. However, what we're not doing is, if it's latched and been stuck for years and not budging, and you've been leaving it there and all of that for a long time, don't just sit there doing the same again if it's not delivering a result. That's where you need to look at the core fear and break that fear down. What often happens with OCD sufferers is they go away, they think, oh, I'm good enough, and they get on with life with still chronic anxiety and chronic guilt persisting, which isn't recovery, but is part of the journey. So then we need to break that down. And so that's so key because those things are what's gripping at the bottom. So for example, when I had the strong fear of death in relation to health OCD, until that came down, health OCD always had the upper hand because there was so many different things that it could latch to, and it always knew that was the core fear. Now, as I brought that down through approaching death, looking at it, breaking down my core fears relating to it, all these different things, then it came down little by little by little. But initially, it would not do that. It was very much latched. It was very much gripped because it knew that fear, that specific fear in relation to death, could override absolutely everything. Because let me take you an example. If your fear of death is so strong in relation to health OCD and it's not coming down, what tends to happen is when you try and sit with, oh, it's just a disease, leave time to pass, whatever, that can help in a lot of situations. But then if you ever do get any developments in a health situation that feels like it's getting worse, then what happens is you then get caught in that cycle. And that's very much what happened to me, because I had a stomach problem that was genetic that then meant that I had to go to the hospital. And when I had to go to hospital, everything then felt like an immediate death was, the death fear was being pushed on. Because what happened was any test or procedure that I had to have, I would be thinking, this is going to go wrong, this is dangerous, this is going to too much, this is going to be a problem. And then what happened was that was pushing me towards that fear. And that's what happens with a lot of OCD fears. What happens is we get into these positions where what it does is it finds a fear, it finds something, and then we get caught in that. So then we try and adapt all our environment very quickly to change, to make sure that we are not anywhere near that. So if it's a fear of HIV, never having sex, never going to a doctor's, never going in for tests, or if with health as well, never going to the doctors, never going to get a test, never doing any of that. So that's what happens. We can do a lot of avoidance. Whereas instead, what we want to be doing is moving towards these bit by bit and breaking down these fears bit by bit by bit by bit, which is absolutely key. Now, the fear of death, I always highlight, is an important one in lots of cases because as we bring it down bit by bit, it helps get under the others. The same as one of the main fueling fears is fear of fear. That's one of the other main ones because we remember how bad we were in the past. We have those memories of, I remember what it was like to be stuck. We remember that so clearly in our head. And that was one of the main things I learned from the likes of Paul David's book, where he was talking specifically about the fear sensation and trying to make us learn to be less scared, as Claire Weeks does. And that's why she was a pioneer in the 60s and 70s, because she was so, people hadn't got any information about why anxiety was, they didn't have any information really about what anxiety was and to the depth of it, and learning to see that it isn't as scary. Now we've got this sort of oversupply of information of why anxiety is just sensations, is just thoughts, is just feelings. We have too much of that now. Whereas now we need to be looking at, let's look at the core fears. Let's look at why this thing is actually scary. Let's look at why this is consuming. Let's look at why this is causing so much of a problem. Really get into that.